Welcome back, Wiz and Weebers, to the channel Doge, where today, believe it or not, I have actually played a game in the new patch before I talk about the cards. One whole game. I know. Shocking, I know. We have 4 new cards, although one of them is a token that is generated by another card, and we have a few balance changes. The main themes here seem to be, for one, we have 2 new cards themed around using spells that aren't from your soul and getting a benefit from that. And the other more major theme is that pieces as a whole have been reworked. So, this first card, Book Register, is a 3-cost 3/3 magic. If you have a spell from a different soul in your hand, deal 3 damage to a monster. Very straightforward, but I like this card. First of all, I think this is just straight up good. Like, I think this is actually a very powerful effect that's going to be very, very useful in a lot of decks. I think if this could deal damage to face, then it would actually be crazy overpowered. Just being able to damage monsters is probably fine, though. Maybe a little bit overtuned, we'll see. But either way, it'll encourage some more, like, shaking up of the gameplay. I've always found that these spells, or these monsters that give you a random spell, which can often give you spells not from your soul, are really fun cards. And it's weird, because a lot of them don't even have, like, bad stats or anything. It's just, usually decks have such a clear idea of what they want to do if they're competitive, that they don't usually have much of a use for running cards like Boombox. In fact, let me just get that up. I just have placeholder Chris here as a... as like a placeholder. Anyway, Boombox is a great example. This is straight up just good value. It's a 3-cost 3/3, pretty good stats, and it gives you another card. No condition. No sneaky little extras. That's amazing, right? And yet, you don't see this card that often. Sure, it's not rare to see, and absolutely it's playable competitively, but especially higher up, this is a pretty rare card to see actually used in decks. I've just been sidetracked by an antivirus notification, and now I don't remember what I was saying. Ah, right, yes. So, the only decks that tend to run this card now are decks that get benefit from Shock, or some other kind of spell-oriented decks, because there's not really many other game plans where getting a random spell can help you with whatever you're aiming for, and often these more competitive decks have a very clear idea of how they want to win the game and how they're going to get there. And while Boombox is straight up great value without any awkward conditions, it still struggles to see use at the highest of levels just because there's not really much of a reward for using it, even though it itself is a pretty good card. And it seems that usually the decks that run cards that they get a reward for running and have a very clear focus are the decks that perform better in general. I am speaking very generally, though. Again, this is absolutely playable and competitive, but usually you have to put it in a deck that, I don't know, has a lot of spell discounting or gets a lot of benefit from Shock and stuff like that. And there's a lot of cards like this in this game. Like I mentioned, when Eggplant Trash Bag came out, that's essentially like a new alternative to Boombox. I don't see this card very often, and it's a shame because it's absolutely not a bad card. Like, that's just at its base, no pun intended, not a bad card. And yet, you're not going to see it that much. What's another good example? Oh yeah, is correct Geode, did they revert it? It's not this. Is it one of the signs? Yes, Snowden sign they changed to be basically like Crack Geode. As long as you spent golden spells last turn, it gave you another like random spell. Again, it's not a bad card, but you just don't see it that often. So I really like the fact that these cards now have a little bit more of a reason to exist, because you can run them in tandem with Book Register. And I think that's especially like the problem is if you're building a deck in competitive high ranks. As I said, not only do you usually have a very clear focus on how this deck plans to win the game, but I was thinking to myself as I was saying it, that's not it completely though, because I definitely have made decks where I've still got empty slots once I've added everything into the deck that I need to win the game. But I think the problem is that usually once you've made that deck, you want to put in cards that you can just play to dump your hand and stay alive, because usually most decks that have a very clear game plan, the kind of stuff you put in straight away are expensive cards. Since they're the very things you're building around, they're usually what will win you the game when you play them, and as a result they're usually quite expensive, which means that usually the cards you want to play in a deck that aren't particularly super high synergy but will help you out in terms of just plainly like staying alive early and not having a full hand, those kind of cards that aren't super high synergy, you generally want them to be cheap cards you can just dump that don't give you any more cards. So all these cards that give you one other spell, even though it's really good value, they'd almost be better if they didn't give you a spell. Obviously, that's not entirely true, but you know what I mean. And I think that the existence of these cards is the last thing we needed, because I could see competitive decks that just have like 6 deck slots left, slotting in 3 Boomboxes and 3 book registers, potentially. I don't think that's that out there. And also, it's just good news because both Boombox and book register, and I think Eggplant Trash Bag, I think all 3 of those were commons, so this is good news for budget players as well. The other card, we're going to skip over this token just for now. The manual is maybe a little bit harder to fit into a deck since it's another one that gives you more cards. But again, certainly if you're playing any deck that doesn't struggle with a full hand, you would put this in too. It's a 5-cost, 5/5, great stats, and it looks at 3 different spells you cast this game from other souls and adds one to your hand with -2 cost. This is going to be especially useful if you manage to find a way to get a good chance of discovering a spell that is extremely powerful to play recursively. Like, I know that sounds weird, really, really specific, but let's have a quick look at the base spells. Oh, can I not look at... Oh, not in crafting. Oh, yeah, bit kind of spoilers. I said I played one game. I played one game of this chess piece deck I made myself. Do not copy... Well, I don't know, maybe copy. I'm not saying this is a good deck. That's just what I put through together. That was my first idea. Anyway, let's look at base spells. So we got Pie for Kindness. We've got Knife for Determination. Oh, Knife is a good one. We've got Melt for Patience. That could be good in the right deck. Strength for Bravery. Generally a good card. Shopping for Integrity. Pretty good if you need Draw. Worsening for Perseverance. Decent control card. Punishment for that. Okay, so the reason why I'm looking at all the base spells is because of Eggplant. Eggplant Trash Bag looks at 3 random base spells and chooses one to add to your hand. If there's only 7 base spells in the game, then you get 3 choices from a pool of 7, which means you have about a 50% chance of getting one spell in particular, if that's the only one you care about, per trash bag you play, meaning after you've played 3 trash bags, the percentage chance that you haven't found the spell that you're looking for at least once is pretty low. It's like somewhere in the like 10-15% chance range. So basically you can give yourself a really good, really high chance of finding a base spell that might be super beneficial to your deck, but usually would not be allowed to be running your deck because it doesn't work with your soul. And then you could use the manual to recursively get that. And the manual is a pretty easy card to be able to duplicate as well, using just any means, because you don't need exact copies like you would with things like Sand Dogs to get maximum value, because it's not the stats you're interested in here, it's the ability. So you can just use your Mad Mew, your paintings, your... well, obviously you can still use the Vessel if you want. You can use just about anything you want. So the manual looks like it's going to be a very powerful card in any deck that gets a super big benefit from crossing over soul spells. But the problem is, of course, finding over any combination of soul spells or soul passive and other souls abilities that are super important to the point where you'd want to make a deck like that. But I can definitely see it, especially in combination with things like Golden Flowers. I think Golden Flowers... Just a moment. This Golden Flowers, the only condition is non-token, isn't it? Non-token spells you play this game. So yeah, if you play a spell that isn't in your soul, as long as it's not a token spell, it still counts. You can still use Golden Flowers to recursively get them if you run out of copies of the manual. So yeah, and also, if you... I wonder if you get them back... Oh, no. I was about to say for a second, maybe if you get them back, they still have the cost reduction. I don't think that would be the case, but if it is, then that's really cool. So yeah, so... if there's any use you can find for any of those base spells that you think, oh wow, that's a good idea, then like to use them in a different soul, then that would be really promising. The main thing I was checking for there, to be honest, if I'm completely honest, was I was checking if Overgrowth was a base spell. I couldn't remember. If Overgrowth was a base spell, that would be sick, because imagine having Overgrowth in any soul you want. But sadly not. Although again, there's still definitely some utility. Some of the more useful ones there definitely seem to be Knife. Being able to get Knife as any soul will be quite nice. And the other one I was thinking of would be... it might sound strange, but just Shopping. You'd need to find a deck that really cares about draw, but generally, if there's ever a super efficient combo in the game found, then Shopping is very, very helpful for it. because it thins out your deck of all the cards that you don't need for the combo, because usually the last card you need for your combo is, you know, the expensive card in your deck. And using a combination of shopping and Seat of the Gods, you can usually get pretty good control over which cards in your deck you're drawing, while also drawing through your deck fast. Two things you really want to do if you want to get to a combo fast. But just generally, even if you're not going to use it for combo, shopping is just efficient draw for any deck that will actually struggle for it. And yeah, to be fair though, I am a little bit disappointed in the base spells, because to be honest, I didn't remember what all they were off the top of my head, and I was thinking, like, a lot of them aren't bad, but a lot of them, it would be hard to find some major synergy with them. Still, there's other ways you could perhaps get it to work. Just a moment. Spell. Let me actually have a quick look at a bunch of random spell cards. We've got Disco Ball. You could use that, I suppose. Trade a Temmie. If I go less cards, one or less, so it couldn't give overgrowth. But there might be some other spells. Bratty. Oh, Bratty would be interesting with this. I like that. Snowy. I thought this was Chilldrake's effect. Oh no, Chilldrake. Oh yeah, I got mixed up. Yeah, no, that's right. Chilldrake draws a card from a monster or a spell from your deck, depending on the side you play them on. So yeah. Right. So, oh well, this kind of works. This isn't great, but like, you could use this on a 2-cost that you want to die. Like, you could play a chest or something. I believe that's a 2-cost 1/2 at the moment, and it draws a card when it dies. You could use this on your own monster, if to make sure that you definitely get the chance to use it on a 2-drop, and that would increase your chances of getting overgrowth off of this if you want to play a non-bravery deck that gets a lot of benefit from generated cards. I need to, you know what? I didn't mean to do this, but I need to look at just all the spells in the game. Just like literally, give me all of them. I've seen all the base ones, so the fact that the base ones aren't being shown doesn't matter so much. Is there any spell that like Another Soul could really do some crazy stuff with? Last Dream, that's the perfect... No, anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of these that sound good. Inflation, maybe. Ooh, you know, that is interesting. I think the problem with that is there's just so many 1-cost spells. But you could use Trader Temmie potentially to have a decent chance of getting Inflation. In fact, let me... Wait, I just realised Wereform. What am I on about? Wereform. Okay, so if you get a 7-cost spell using Snowy, you have a 1 in 4 of getting Wereform. That's probably not enough. Oh! Wait. How much does Neo cost? Wait, is it 11 or is it 10? Oh, it's 10, isn't it? It's 10. Ah. Let me look at 11 drops. If you could find an 11 drop you actually want to kill that you could play, and then once you killed it, Snowy would have a 100% chance of giving you Hypergoner. Do we have any 11 drop? Oh, no. Okay, they've thought of that. Potentially. The only 11 drop you might be half alright with killing is Mad Dummy, but you can't even kill Mad Dummy with 2 damage. Not without silencing it. Ah, they've thought of everything. I don't know what... Okay, to be fair, I don't know what Snowy does if there's no spell of that cost. If it is that it just rounds it down, you could do it on a 12 cost, which could work with Tombstone. Ooh, I've got to try that. I've got to figure out if it works like that. I'll get back to you if it works like that. If I can use Snowy on Tombstone to guaranteed get Hypergoners in a soul that isn't Determination, and then duplicate them using... Yeah, okay. There's some potential here. You can see why I'm spending so long on this one little thing, because even though it seems rather innocuous, like, there's a lot you could potentially do with this. So, anyway, can I just scroll that to a decent spot again? Okay, so let's actually talk about the other 2 new cards that I forgot existed. We have Mr. Ruckus and Pawn Queen. Again, chess pieces in general have just received a whole rework this patch. Mr. Ruckus, you can see, has a new keyword called Switch, which isn't really a new mechanic. If anything, this should have been a keyword ages ago, because this mechanic's been in the game for a while. But now, whenever you have those effects that are do one thing if you're on the left side, do one thing if you're on the right side, now that they have this switch keyword. So, left side to do the first thing, right side to do the second thing. So this is an 8-cost 6/6 taunt that, when played, will set either set a monster's stats to 4/3 or deal 3 damage to it, depending on whether it's played on the left or the right. Now, you might notice that there was some other text here when we said switch, when we looked at it. And you might notice that these two things sure would be super powerful if they could trigger at the exact same time. That's because this card over here, Pawn Queen, does a bunch of stuff, but the most important thing it does is give you the new artifact Endgame. Endgame is an artifact that makes all pieces played get +3 attack, but also makes all of them trigger both switch effects regardless of which position they're in. Every single time a switch effect would be triggered. Pawn Queen herself is a 5-cost 7/7 that will burn 11 pawn men in your dust pile to fill your hand with pawn men. And whenever a pawn man is... Oh, no, sorry, I got this mixed up. It's not whenever a pawn man is played. When she does that, she'll give all the pawn men she generates +1 dodge, or give them +3 health, depending on which side of the board she's played. By the way, the +1 dodge is almost always going to be better. So I guess you want to play them on the left. And then they have delay at the endgame artifact. So yeah, I don't think, unless you get multiple Pawn Queens, you can use the endgame artifact to make the Pawn Queen do both of those effects. So yeah. I think, yeah, you'd have to get 2 Pawn Queens to do that. So, right, those are the 2 new ones. What's my opinion on these? Well, I'm not going to give my opinion on Pawn Queen, because that's more giving my opinion on the entire chess archetype, which is kind of a big thing to tackle. But Mr. Ruckus individually, I think this is just, even outside of the chess-like piece archetype, not a bad card. Like, it's an 8/6/6 taunt. It's not that expensive. It's got the option of either setting it to 4/3 or dealing 3 damage, so it can be quote-unquote hard removal. Obviously not perfect, but honestly not bad hard removal. Or it can just be convenient damage when you need it if hard removal is not likely. Honestly, just this seems like just a decent card on its own. Like, you don't even have to run this in chess pieces. You can just run this as a card on its own. It seems decent. It seems like a good filler deck for control decks that already have their win condition in the deck, but now they have free deck slots and they don't want to... And they want to slot something in that doesn't cost that much, like at least less than like 9 or something, but it's still... what it does is to help you stay alive and not draw more cards or whatever, which you might not want. So yeah. Getting on to the balance changes, first one we got is Rudolph, which I'm glad to see this buffed, because this was a weird card. It technically was pretty popular from what I could see, but I didn't actually think it was good. The main thing I thought about it was that it was probably more popular just because no spell decks are popular, and Bookcase is a good card, which is the other no spells card. And less because Rudolph is a good card. I felt like a lot of decks that run Rudolph just ran Rudolph because they were running no spell decks, and Rudolph was a no spell card. And to be fair, you only have 2 no spell cards in the game, so if you're going to run a no spell deck, you may as well run Rudolph. But even then, honestly, old Rudolph was only like an inclusion half the time in my no spell decks. I honestly preferred a lot of the time to just run bookshelves and no Rudolphs, because a lot of my decks did not benefit from Rudolph. Rudolph goes for a very specific thing. You see, as you can see, they used to cost 5, and they now cost 4, which is definitely a deserved buff. So they're currently a 4/5/4, but they used to be a 5/5/4. And if you had no spells in your deck, all they would do is heal you for 6. You can't even choose the target, it's always yourself. And even though yourself is the most likely target, it obviously would be nicer if it could potentially target a monster. So, yeah. This is a weird effect, and at 5 it was kind of pointless. At 4, at least, I can say, even if I don't care about the healing, it's a 4-cost 5/4 that might save my life. And a 4-cost 5/4 is a good stat line, so I should run it. The problem was, at 5, it was like, okay, so it's not awful stats, but that's not even good stats, and all I get is slightly above average healing, which I can't target. And that's for running no spells in my deck? You know, it was a very underwhelming reward. And the other thing is, the fact that this healing isn't an insane amount, like it's not like 10 health, it's not 15 health, means that it's not like a super big payoff card that you would run in a control deck. But that's fine, since to be fair, it's not that expensive either. But then it might have been better if it was an expensive card that healed a lot, because there's a semi-cheap card that heals an above average amount. It kind of felt like, okay, so am I supposed to be playing this for stats then? I mean, it's not good stats though. Like, if I'm playing this fast, I don't care about the healing, and if I'm playing this slow, the healing isn't enough that I care, and the only good thing that gets bundled with the healing is the stats, which aren't even that good, but on top of that, I don't care about the stats that much, because I'm playing for the long game. I felt like Rudolph, the only time at which Rudolph actually was useful was for countering aggro if you were falling behind against aggro, which I didn't think was very necessary, because if you're running a no spells deck, again, you're running it for Bookshelf, not Rudolph. And Bookshelf leans pretty hard into control. I don't know, if there's a certain spell you really need, maybe combo, but I don't know. I think Bookshelf is mostly a control card, even though certainly it can be run in really any deck except aggro. So the fact that it's mostly a control card means that you're obviously incentivized to run no spell decks as control decks. And if you run a no spell deck that you can run Rudolph in, and it's a control deck, then it's like you already have an even matchup against aggro, I would say. I mean, I understand it's debatable, but I think control is even against aggro. I think control loses to combo, but against aggro it's even. Because I know the stereotype is, oh no, aggro decks, they mow over control decks before they can get the chance to play their big stuff and they die too early. But you also got to remember that control decks have board clears, and board clears just make aggro decks insta-concede. Which is why I say it's an even matchup. Not necessarily that you win all the time, but like, you know, if you have the board clear, you win. If you don't have the board clear until it's too late and you don't have the healing, then you probably lose. So the fact that it's so polarized like that, and it's kind of a 50-50, do you have it, do you not? I think it's fair to say that it is, you know, an even matchup. So it's not even helping you against your bad matchups, the healing. In fact, again, your worst matchup as control is combo, or OTK, or any variant of that. Any kind of tries to kill you just by burning you down and not caring about what's on the board. And unless it's specifically burn, which even then, if it's like gemstone kind of burn, then you're hopeless. But unless it's burn, the health regeneration won't help you much. I mean, if someone's going to kill you in one turn, having healed won't matter if they can still kill you when you have full health. So, yeah, I know I've got a bit of a long one about this, but like, Rudolph is a bit of a weird card. So, as I say, it exists solely to counter aggro. It's good stats while also healing you, which is good at countering aggro because you don't fall behind on board and you also get health. But it's so laser focused on only countering aggro when I already feel like no spell decks aren't going to struggle against aggro usually, because the thing aggro counters is combo, and I don't think combo really tends to run no spell decks. Spells seem pretty important generally in combo decks, so like, I don't know. Rudolph just seems like a weird card to me. As a 4 cost, I think he's going to see more use. I still think he's going to be weird. I still think he's going to be, like, sometimes not even included in no spell decks. But definitely more playable now. Definitely feels like less of a downside. Definitely an easy filler card to chuck into those decks. Because now I think he's also not bad against mid-range. To be fair, you're already favored against mid-range, though, but, like, I suppose, no. This makes him decent against combo, because if you're control, I mentioned combo is your worst matchup, and this is good stats, which means you can play for the board, which means you can kind of play less like control and more like aggro if you realize you're against a combo deck, and try to kill the combo deck before they get their combo better. I see some utility in that. But you can see how this is just, well, you have to think in really weird ways to think of how to use this card, because it's just so impractical. It's even though it's such a simple card, like, trying to find the application of it is really unintuitive. Well, anyway, Queen has been buffed. Could see that one coming. Ween. Queen has been buffed. Could see that one coming. Go away. No, we're not talking about you yet. We're not talking about you. We're not talking about... There's too many queens. Okay. Queen is an 11 cost 6/7 now instead of a 12 cost 6/7. Can I be honest? I never played this card since the rework. In fact, did I ever play this card since it was even added to the game? I did play like Queen like once or twice. I nearly forgot. I did play the original Queen once or twice. But the new Queen is in the one from the last patch. Never played them. Not even once. So I can't really comment much on this. I don't know how good / bad she was. She seemed pretty bad, and it seems like that is what she was. Bad. So this buff seems warranted. But I'm not going to lie. I don't mind if this means they have to knock the stats down, but, like, can this be a 10 cost? Like, 11 is a critical breaking point, because you can only at maximum earn 2 gold a turn? 10 gold a turn, unless you're Integrity. So, that means that any card that costs more than 10 really struggles to be played. Even just 10 cost cards, even though they're only 1 gold less, are not that hard to sneak in. And that's why I think the original Queen was playable, even though she wasn't exactly the best card in the game, was because at least she was a decent filler card for a control deck, because she kept you alive. If she was played at the right time, she did screw the opponent up, even though it wasn't very reliable. But in the worst case scenario where it wasn't reliable, she was just a big taunt that bought you some time and wasn't so expensive that you would be scared that you wouldn't be able to play her. And even just that 1 extra gold makes it like now you have to plan it in advance. If you don't plan in advance when you're going to play Queen, then you're not going to be able to afford to play her a decent amount of the time. And it's especially bad because you'd often play her to stay alive, and the time at which you're most likely to not save any gold and spend all of it and then not have enough to play Queen next turn at the right moment would be if you're panicked about staying alive, which it feels like is what Queen is supposed to be about, is like making a comeback if you're falling behind. So like 11 gold feels really bad. Like it's better than 12, it's definitely a deserved buff, but like I think slightly smaller stats with 10 cost would be what this card needs. I think that if something's more than 10, it's got to be a huge effect. And this is a technically huge effect, but only for the turn it's on the board. As soon as the opponent kills that Werewire and cracks it open, the impact of Queen becomes much, much less impressive, especially for an over 10 cost legendary. So yeah, now I'm not going to jump too quick to this, because they do seem to be generally buffing. I don't want to call it the catch archetype, because it's not really a deck archetype, but generally cards that catch things on the board and then the opponent has a chance to get them back. Cards like that have been buffed and made stronger recently, and perhaps you could make a deck where you spam catches to get an unreasonable lead on the board and then hope that your opponent doesn't have the comeback mechanics to crack open your core monsters, and then you can just win on board. What I'm basically talking about is, as you can see under it, Dimensional Blocks also got +1/+1. So let me just quickly get that up. Not a significant change, but it's a change, and it does mean that it's better tempo. So Shawm is a good card. Queen is probably not a good card even after the buff, and Dimensional Blocks is like a good question mark card, as I'd like to say. I think it's good. I don't use it that often, it's the problem. I remember back when I was newer to Undercards, it would be all I'd just spam this card. I'd just play it, silence it, return it to my hand, play it, silence it, return it to my... I was that guy all the way down at silver or gold. Did this used to be a base card? Because I remember mostly using base cards in my decks, like all the way back then, and I was using Dimensional Box all the time. I don't know if it was a base card or if I just so happened to have 3 copies of it. I'm getting sidetracked. So yeah, I don't know exactly what you attach this onto, because this in itself is not enough to make a deck, and it needs to be... This is more a side kind of thing that a deck that already exists would like to be able to do. Whatever that deck is, it's a deck that should be able to go long enough to play Queen, but also be one that cares about tempo. So that being said, I would imagine it would be a mid-range deck, but I'm imagining some kind of mid-range deck or maybe low-end control, where whatever it is you're doing, you care about tempo, and you have 3 deck slots to run 3 Dimensional Boxes, a copy of Shawm, and a copy of Queen. And you could just have these swing turns, where even though each of those cards individually, except Shawm, aren't that great, you could be like, okay, Dimensional Box, wipe that monster, Shawm, wipe that monster, Queen, wipe that monster, use the Werewire, attack into the last one. You now have an empty board, and I have a full one, have fun. Just have fun, fucker. then, like, I have to admit, even though that's memey, that is strong. Like, what does your opponent do in response to that? Now, of course, if the answer is they play a Hypergunner or they play Test of Will, then you cry. But if for whatever reason we don't see any Test of Will or Hypergunner for the most part in this meta, then hey, you know what? Could be. I don't know. Now I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking that maybe it is really just full-on meme. Like, I'm just confused, because Queen seems so underpowered, like, so bad, that, like, I have to think that there's something I'm not seeing here. Like, that I don't understand how good it is that it gives you that temporary swing where you are really ahead and then you fall behind. I keep thinking I must not understand how good that is. And to be fair, I literally haven't even played the card yet. So maybe it is better than I think, but... Now I've said it all out loud, like, I think, yeah, that sounds strong, but again, I've already mentioned if they Hypergonna, you concede. And on top of that, even though it's a really strong play, that's what, 18, 23 gold play. Yeah, yeah. Like, the worst part is, you can make that decent if you make it just dimensional block boxes and Shaw and drop the queen. So the only way to make this idea work is to just not even run queen. It's what it seems like. So, yeah. Well, anyway. The next buff is Mad Dummy. You'll love to see it. Mad Dummy going from 12 to 11. I genuinely think this card is really good and honestly underused. But I'll certainly take a buff. No complaints here. To be fair, that was one of the only weaknesses I thought the card had, even though I think it's overstated. It definitely is a little bit clunky to play, because you can often forget just how much 12 is. Again, if it's above 10, it's a problem. Even if it's just a little above 10, it's a problem. And to be fair, it's still a problem. It's 11. But, you know, it's easier to save 1 gold than 10. Potentially, you could still get around that with integrity. I like to see it. Not much to say. I don't think this changes the playability of Mad Dummy that much, because it already costs 12. The reduction of 1, not a big deal, I don't think. I mean, for Queen, it's a slightly bigger deal, because Queen is very tempo-based, whereas Mad Dummy is more of a comeback mechanic. So it's not like you need to get this out as early as possible, so it's not like a cost reduction matters. It's more you have to get it out at the right time. So a cost reduction still matters for that, but not for much else. So yeah, again, I just don't have much to say. It's slightly better now. It was already decent in my opinion, a little bit underrated. But now it's just slightly better than decent. Snowden's sign has been reworked again. Oh wait, I already looked at this. Wasn't this? Oh, did it not give it -1 cost before? I don't think it gave it -1 cost before. God damn it, I thought I actually would get through one patch without being unsure of what the change was. I don't know why I thought I could do that. But I thought I could do that. Right, well anyway, microwave. I'm confused. So, microwave has been changed from a 1/2/2 with delay, was it? No, it must not have been delay. It couldn't have been delay. Well, it's been changed anyway. I think it used to burn the rightmost card in your hand. It was either the rightmost or the leftmost. And now it burns a card in your hand, which I'm guessing is a card of your choice. It's a buff. I thought that they might change this card because it's very weird. Like, what synergy is there for this card? Like, why do you use this card? Like, what is the answer to that? Like, what deck uses microwave? I'm not even saying this as like a, God, microwave is such a trash card, like, haha, let's dunk on it thing. Because honestly, like, when I was talking about what the worst card in the game was with people in my Discord server ages ago, this was one of the cards that came up. And I certainly agree it's one of the worst cards in the game, like on the bottom half. But in fairness, 1/2/2 Taunt, it has its uses. And the downside isn't that bad, since it's already so easy to get so much draw in this game with just a little bit of deck synergy that you can very easily slot this into a deck that would have too many cards anyway, and the downside doesn't even feel like a downside anymore, and potentially even saves you from overdrawing. At least now you get to choose what goes away instead of potentially an important combo piece in your deck going missing. While it's, you know, not crazy tempo, but still above average tempo, and it has taunt, so it's not irrelevant in the late game completely. So, like, I had some defense for it. The main thing I have a problem with, though, isn't that it's too weak, even though it is probably a little weak. It's not that, it's that it's, like, what do you use this with? There's no synergy with burn in this game, as far as I'm aware. There's nothing that gives you a benefit for burning a certain type of card. I mean, there's the card that you can burn a card in your hand to draw a snail, but, like, besides that, I mean, I guess the quote-unquote synergy is cramming your hand full of cards you don't actually care about and then burning them, but, like, that's not worth it to get 1/2/2s. That's not how you win. That's not a winning strategy. That's not a win condition. So, like, I was expecting if they were going to change microwave, they would just completely rework it, give it completely brand new ability. I don't know why they're doing this. It's weird. So, if microwave is used, which it could be, it honestly could be, I think it will simply be just boring old aggro zoo tempo decks, that sort of thing. that have so much card draw they don't care about burning a card. Or, on the other hand, perhaps adrenaline decks that play this when their hand is empty and then draw a bunch of cards from the adrenaline artifact. Which, by the way, I'm surprised I don't see more of that artifact. It's pretty good from what I've played with it, but I rarely see it on ladder. In fact, I don't know if I've seen anyone use it aside from me. Anyway, get sidetracked there. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you're curious what I thought the worst card in the game was, well, I gave it a long and hard think. It's kind of funny because when the conversation started, this was the first card I said, and then I said, I mean, it's the worst one I can think of off the top of my head, but there's probably a worse one in the game that I just forgot about. And we kept looking through all the cards in the game, and I just couldn't find one that was worse. So I genuinely think this is probably the worst card in the game. Oh yeah, sorry, it's Queen Painting. Yeah, Queen Painting. I do understand there's some use to this, that if it transforms into a Spanton Painting, then it will lose all debuffs on it. So if your opponent had already damaged it, and it had frozen it, applied KR, and then it triggers its support, then it will just turn into a 6/8 Spanton Painting that doesn't have any of those debuffs and is back to full health. I understand that, but other than that, this is a 12/6/8 haste. Like, yes, it can turn into Spanton Painting, but all Spanton Painting does is give taunt, and, like, nothing else. It's like, oh, okay. Now, something like this might be decent if it was like a 10 or a 6, or not, 6 would be too cheap. If it was like a 10 or a 9 cost, it might be playable. If it was an 8 cost, it might even be good, or a 7 cost. But at 12, this is oh boy, yeah, disgusting. Can't even really run it in any deck except maybe a Solidity deck, but I don't know what Solidity deck is going to play a 12 cost, not even Legendary or DT card. That's not even really like a top of your game. Anyway, Small Plug. Small Plug has now gone to... It's been updated. It's a 3-cost 2/5 with haste and taunt, and it has magic. Switch, give a plug in your hand haste, or give it taunt. You know, I kept saying how I've not even played plugs, and I was starting to think to myself recently, you know what? I've gone quite a while without playing plugs. Even if I don't think they're a great deck, maybe I should give them a go. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on them. Maybe I'll even discover something unexpected, a way to make it that I never even thought of before, or maybe some cards that seem super important to the deck that I could actually cut that make the deck more efficient. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. I mean, I thought that plants were a meme when I never saw them on ladder, and I was just like, huh, there's a bunch of these plant cards and I've never seen anyone play them. I guess I should use them. And then I got like an 85% win rate up to legend with it. So, you know, maybe I'll have the same experience with plugs. And now this has happened. Not that this kills plugs, but I thought that Small Plug was one of the better cards in the plug package. And I think this is worse, even though it's labelled as a buff. I don't think this is a bad card per se. 3/2/5 haste taunt is good stats, and I guess giving a haste in your plug in your hand haste could be convenient. But it's like I said when this card first came out when I was reviewing it. I was saying that it's such a threat, the old version. The fact that it can give an infinite amount of plugs, haste, if you have the gold to play them, and your opponent doesn't know how big those plugs in your hand are going to be, that is a real threat. And I know that it's often hard to give points for mind games, but I think that Small Plug, the original, was very good for mind games. Because since it was a 5 health 3-drop that only had 2 attack, the best thing to do usually with things with those stat lines is to ignore them. But with Small Plug, you're playing a risky game if you ignore it, because it's providing a constant threat of I might just be able to chuck down my entire hand, and I might have a 10/10 plug in my hand that only costs 3. You don't know. Maybe I do. You know, and being able to just slap that down with haste and suddenly swing the board meant that Small Plug was like a threat, even though it had a high health and a low attack value for its cost, which usually would just lead to it being ignored for the most part. So yeah, I think that this change is actually probably going to make it marginally worse, which is a bit of a shame. I see why they label it as a buff, because it's more of an instantaneous effect, and in theory, it's even better than the original one as long as you were only getting giving one thing taunt with the original. And to be fair, often with the original version, you were only giving one plug taunt, but that was often. when you did give more than one plug taunt, it did seem like it could cause some really powerful swings from what I did play against other plug decks. Even though I never played one myself, other plug decks, even though I beat most of them I came across, because again, they don't seem to be very good, the ones that I struggled to beat were mostly ones where they got a huge play off a small plug and suddenly swung the board. Anyway, I still think plugs are going to be about as viable as before, just like a little bit worse, which is a bit of a hit to them considering they're already not good. So now we're going to have to get to the I'm looking at Birdly Plush all the way down there, and I while I'm speaking, and I shouldn't be doing that because that's not what we're talking about next. Now we're going to get to the chess pieces. These are... I don't want to talk about these like one by one. I don't know. I guess I'll quickly storm through them and wait to give opinions until I'm done. Okay, Pawn Man is now a 1-cost 1/1. When played, deal 1 damage to a random enemy or heal 2 health to you, depending on whether it's played on the left or right. Dark Pawn Man. 4-cost 3/3 haste. Magic. If it's played on the left, draw a piece with +1/+1, or if it's played on the right, add 3 Pawn Men to your hand. The card we just saw. Chessboard. Chessboard is a 4-cost 2/6 taunt. Magic. Summon a Pawn Man for each 3 pieces in your dust pile. Again, Pawn Man is the first card we saw. Mr. Elegance. Oh wait, is the bottom one for this. Mr. Elegance is impressive. 5-cost 3/3. When played, gain +1/+1. I don't know why it says attack. That seems to be a misprint because when I played this card, it just gives +1/+1, like held and attack. It gives +1/+1 and it gains armor. And if you play it on the right, it summons a copy of itself. The next one's Mr. Society. 3-cost 4/3. You get to choose another non-token piece in your hand, and if you play it on the left side of your hand, you will copy it, of the board I mean, then you will copy the card and add it to your hand. If you play it on the right side, you'll copy it, but you'll get 2 copies, but they'll go to the deck and not your hand. Pawn Man Statue is the card that... Yeah, Pawn Man Statue is the card that generates Pawn Queen. You need to have 11 Pawn Men in your dust pile, and you'll add Pawn Queen to your hand. So yeah, and those are the piece cards. Okay, so let's have a quick look at them all at once. These are the piece cards in the game right now. So what do I think of this as an archetype? Well, when I first saw this, honestly, seeing how the Pawn Queen could grant +3 attack to every single piece that's played for the rest of the game, as a permanent effect for being played once, I was thinking for a second this could be really good, just because you do have near infinite generation of Pawn Men, and giving these all +3 attack makes them obviously a much greater threat. And in theory, you could also give them all dodge using Pawn Queen herself. So having a bunch of 1-cost 4/1 dodgers that deal 2 damage to an enemy seems like a decent win condition. It seemed like it. So I was thinking, maybe this is a really good strategy. Maybe this is a good archetype. But I think that Pieces is going to be another one of those archetypes where actually going all in on them is bait. You don't want to run all the piece cards. It would be better to not run a piece deck, but run a deck that just so happens to run pieces with mild piece synergy. I think if you go all in on this Pawn Man strategy, then you're doomed to fail. The Pawn Man itself is an alright card. Even though it's not very impactful, it is just a 1-cost you can drop that sometimes will deal the 1 damage you need to stay alive. And I can tell you, Dark Pawn Man is really annoying, because people often play it actually for the 3 Pawn Men rather than drawing a piece from your deck with +1/+1. And they just 3 damage instant with a haste, and then they spam you with 1 damage with Pawn Men, and they just keep spamming you, and they kill everything you play for a temporary amount of time. You see, that's the thing. With these Pawn Man decks, you need to obviously take a long time to get your Pawn Queen up. And then once you do get your Pawn Queen up, even though it is threatening that all your pieces have +3 attack, from what I saw, the endgame artifact giving both effects of the switches wasn't that impactful. And on top of that, this was not actually very threatening, because even though everything had the attack to be a threat, they didn't have the health, since most of the things they were playing were pawn men. So it was really easy for me to just kill them off, either with my own pawn men, because they would 1 damage ping them and instantly kill them, or to just, honestly, ignore them. I was surprised, but unless there was a full board of these things, all with 4 attack, it wasn't that much of a threat a lot of the time. It was enough that I didn't have to deal with it instantly and I could wait until a more convenient moment on a later turn. Combine that with, again, the fact that these things don't gain health off that benefit, they just gain attack. And I feel like most decks will probably be able to handle the win condition of these pawn man decks. By the time you get your pawn queen up, you would have to be lightning fast and really lucky with your draws to get 11 pawn men into your dust pile within like an early enough turn that like control decks don't already have access to. Strafe, to Hypergoner, to Test of Will, to every card that will screw over your strategy instantly. And yes, even if you get board clear with this deck, you have way more pawn men to use, which, yeah, I will give it that. That is definitely a strength of the deck. But I think Pawn Queen is a meme, to be honest. I don't think Pawn Queen is that great. Now, again, this is based off one game and just off theory. But it just seems like you often have the resources to deal with it. And what I was more impressed with, personally, was the non-Pawn Queen synergy cards that just so happen to synergize with pieces instead. Because, personally, the first game I played was against someone else running the same deck, but with them, they rushed their Pawn Queen out, which you think would make them win, but they did a lot of weird, bad tempo plays and dropped a whole bunch of pawn men at weird times where they weren't really getting much benefit for the sake of filling their dust pile faster. And even though that means that I never got my pawn queen in that game, and they did get their pawn queen, the problem is that Undercards only has 4 board slots. If there were more board slots, this would be a terrifying strategy. But in the process of trying to fill his dust pile with 11 pawn men, he often found himself with 4 pawn men on the board, all 1/1s with no buffs, no abilities, nothing being contributed to the board. And they constantly found themselves not able to threaten me because the fact that obviously they're only dealing 4 damage a turn. And I was kindness, so I was healing some of that back every turn as well. So their board wasn't threatening. And not only that, but I didn't have any motivation to kill his pawn men. They're just 1/1s. And even though they can be buffed, they can't actually be buffed while they're on the board. They can only be buffed when they're in his hand and then being played onto the board. There's actually none of these cards will actually give +1/+1 or whatever to a buff to a piece that's already on the board. None of these cards, any of these 7, or the Pawn Queen herself, the 8th, will give any benefit to a piece that's already on the board. So a 1/1 piece on the board is no threat. This is literally a downside to your opponent. It's literally bad for them to be playing pawn men because even though they are stats on the board, they're taking up a whole board slot. They've only got 4, and then I can just ignore them, and then they can't play anything. And yes, I can't play anything either. If I do play anything, then they get to attack into it, kill off their pawn men, and, fill out those spaces. But even still, they're still kind of wasting their pawn men then, and I can still choose when to play something. Even if it's not likely that I can hold off forever, I can still hold off for a turn or two and just make it inconvenient for them. Make it so they're never able to play things when it's convenient for them. And I can just sit there and wait until I've got a better hand, and it gets even better when you take into account Mr. Elegance. I mentioned this card is impressive just in its own right. Don't even look at it being a piece. It's a 5-cost 3/3 that can either become a 5-cost 4/4 armor, which I don't actually think is even a bad card. Armor's a scary mechanic in this game, and the cheaper you can get it, the better. I mean, Charles, in theory, doesn't seem that impressive at all. It's just a 2-cost 3/2, effectively, except it's a 3/1, but it has armor, but that effectively is a 2-cost 3/2. But as soon as you get 1 buff on him, he's the best aggro card in the game. So, I think a 5/4/4 armor is actually just already a good card. And then the second option is to summon a copy of him. That's a 5/6/6. No condition, except playing it on the right. It's just a 5/6/6. And it gets even better with Handbuff. It's like, what? Okay, sure, I'll take it. It's just a good card. And of course, this card destroys pawn men, because not only is it a good armor card, but the fact it has armor means it's literally invulnerable to them. He trades his pawn men in, and they deal 0 damage to him. So I'm just playing Mr. Elegances against this guy, and they're just realizing, well, shit, I need to clear board space so I can actually play my deck. So I guess I've just got to attack all my pawn men for 0 damage into this Mr. Elegance that I already played to heal me for 0 health because I'm already at full health. So at that point, that guy's not actually playing Pond Men to do anything except fill his dust pile. He's paying 1 gold for every single one of the 11 he needs to do nothing except get his Pond Queen a bit faster. And yes, again, when you get the Pond Queen, it is strong, but it's not strong enough that it's a free win. That guy played a full board of Pond Men with the thingy, with the artifact, with the endgame artifact 3 times against me, and I still won that game. And all I did was I just ignored all his units and kept hitting it in the face, and he couldn't do anything about it. So, yeah, it seems like the best way to play pieces is forget about Pond Man unless you're using it as just a filler card in your deck, just like so you can play a 1-drop to deal 1 extra damage in a convenient moment, and like it's just a cheat card in a deck that's otherwise got expensive cards. Unless that's the case, forget about your Pond Men. And definitely forget about the Pond Men statue. Probably forget about your chessboard too. Yeah, forget about chessboard. Dark Pond Man depends. It depends if you want it for the second ability, for the first ability. I mean, if you want to draw a piece with +1/+1, then run Pond Man, Dark Pond Man, and then sometimes you'll get use out of the second option of 3 Pond Men to your hand. But the main ones are these 3 that you want. Mr. Society, Mr. Ruckus, and Mr. Elegance. As I mentioned, Mr. Ruckus is just on its own a really good control card. And honestly, it's kind of weird. Even though these 2 switches would work together nicely with Pond Queen if you get the endgame artifact, at the same time, like, 1, it's kind of overkill, but 2, you don't really want to play something like Mr. Ruckus with endgame, because the +3 attack is actually a more significant benefit a lot of the time, and this is not something that gets proportionally a very good benefit from, you know, being from having 3 more attack, whereas this gets quadruple the attack from having 3 more. Mr. Elegance, I already mentioned, it's just good stats, and Mr. Society. So what I'm thinking is, it might even be a Handbuff deck more than a piece deck. You might use Mr. Elegance, and you might Handbuff it. You might use Dark Pond Men to tutor it out and Handbuff it. It's already got +1/+1. Use Handbuff cards to make it even bigger. Use Mr. Society to shuffle more copies into your deck. And then you also just have Mr. Ruckus to stay alive. This all seems very promising, because then what you have is a pretty powerful deck, honestly, where you're constantly getting, like, I don't know, 5-cost 6/6s that either become 5-cost 7/7s with armor, which is terrifying, or 5-cost 12/12s split across 2 body, which is even more terrifying. So, yeah, I think that, yeah, these are the 3 highlight cards. These 2 cards are usable. These 2 cards, even though they're the main build around for the deck, I honestly think they're bait. I don't think you use them. I don't think you actually want them in your deck. So, that was a bit of a tangent, but that's obviously the majority of, like, the new content, so I had to cover it in detail. Hey, I'm editing this in somewhere in the video. I don't know where I'm going to jam this. But basically, I thought I had, before I started recording the video, and then it was nagging me the entire video. I thought I'd forgotten something, but I got to the end without remembering it. I thought, it must not have been anything. And then I remembered what it was. And the worst part is I remember what it was because I thought this was a really cool original idea that no one else would have, and then I saw someone else bring up the exact same idea in my Discord server. So, you know, so basically, there is one use I could potentially see for Pond Men. Since I've mentioned that, like, I think this whole Pond Man spam is a bit of a meme, I was kind of looking into, okay, this seems like a meme, how can I turn this good? And one thing I was thinking is, if we get so many Pond Men in our hand, what if since each of these is not a very valuable card on their own, what if we use cards that just don't care about what card it is in your hand, they just dump it, like they use it up as some sort of resource. Generally what I'm thinking is stuff like, well, acceleration. Choose a card in your hand, burn it, draw 3 cards. Obviously that's not enough of a benefit to really be worth building a deck around, but obviously it is a good idea to burn your Pond Man to draw 3 more cards from your deck, which are probably going to be better than some random Pond Man. So yeah. And what that got me thinking too was a few cards. There was Aesthetic Aaron, but that wasn't a super great one. It's just kind of, you get a slightly better card in its place and you give them a Pond Man, which they probably can't use very well, but like, could be worse. It's not really that big a deal, whatever. I was thinking, okay, so what about, I don't know, I guess this is a use for Microwave. Yeah, but this is already kind of an card, so what do we use it for? And then it clicked. that I didn't have to just think about cards being discarded or burned in return for an effect. I could think about cards being transformed. And as soon as I had that idea, I instantly went to Purple Mascot. This is a very unpopular card, but one I'm actually a big fan of. I use this in a decent amount of my decks, and I think it's very underrated. And I thought I was the only one who thought that, but apparently I'm not the only one, and someone else in my Discord also thinks they're underrated and also had the exact same idea as me. Well, anyway. Well, us fellow Purple Mascot lovers gotta stick together. Jesus. Okay, my mic, it keeps falling over. It's really winding me up. I don't know how much better I can stand this up. Okay, right, anyway. So, this card, if you've never used it before, which honestly I won't be surprised if a decent amount of you haven't, is a 4-cost 4/4 rare that turns a card in your hand into a copy of a random epic monster that is either in your deck or your dust pile, which even means that this card basically can't ever be bricked unless the card in question is literally just deleted from existence. Because you could run into the situation of, oh no, I drew all my epics and now this Purple Mascot can't do anything. But then if you play your epics and let them die, they're in your dust pile. So your mascot is activated again. So, why is this card so great? Because, first of all, low cost. Second of all, good stats for cost. Third of all, this is not only duplication, that it can be easily targeted to a specific target, but on top of being duplication, it's also hand management and tutoring. So even though it doesn't draw the card, you can still use this for if you have a card in your hand that's almost certainly not going to be useful, which a lot of the time, actually, for long game decks, that will be the case. You have to run so many contingency plans in your deck that often you will draw something in your hand which you actually don't ever get a good use for, but you still had to put in your deck just in case you went across another deck that if you didn't have that card would destroy you. And in those situations, you can easily drop a Purple Mascot and say, okay, useless tech card that isn't going to help me in this matchup, be gone. I now want another epic. But it's only an epic monster. That's quite narrow. What epic monsters do we even care about? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there's actually quite a few. Well, I say that, to be fair, I shouldn't make it out like there's loads of them. A lot of them are cards that have similar functions, like Throne's a good one, but then why would you want to duplicate Throne? And Throne's already a tutor. Do you need a tutor for your tutor? I mean, it's not bad, but it's not that great of an idea. You could use Demon Flower if you're really trying to stall out your deck, but... I'm gonna lose it. The mic is literally standing as straight as I can get it. Its legs... as good as I can get them, with me not touching it, and it's just deciding to fall over 5 minutes after I set it down. Okay. As I was saying, if you were running a deck about buffing Metaton, you know, I shouldn't go through all the options because there's a lot of options as you can see. But generally, a lot of these are cards that would, a decent amount of these are cards that would benefit from being duplicated. Honestly, even Library Looks, because you could, since it would put the copy into your hand and there'd still only be one copy in your deck, it wouldn't break the no duplicates condition. It would allow you to get double Library Looks. There's quite a few options here in general, but where it gets really interesting is, well, if we look at the top end, you could copy stuff like Tombstone, that's a huge play, or Golden Mascot in a deck that's running those, that's also a huge play. You could technically use it to get more Sanddogs if that was something you wanted to do in the Sanddog deck. Now, usually you'd rather have one super buff target, but if you ever make a variant of that deck that just wants as many Sanddogs as possible, that's valid. But anyway, I should probably get to my point. Big Bomb, that's another one. Mystery Machine, if you're running a deck that can prevent the silence on it, that's huge. In fact, how did I forget that? I was using, a while ago, a Bravery deck using Ambush to pull these out that copied them using Purple Mascot. I'm surprised I forgot about that. Ghost and Tombstone, same principle as Library Looks, in fact, even better in my opinion. I never thought about that. I don't use this card much. I should. Ooh, that's spicy. So yeah, anyway, getting to the main point though, there are 3 main applications of this card. There used to be 2. I would say there's now 3. And one of the ones I haven't mentioned yet is Bookshelf. If you're running a no spells deck, then Bookshelf is the best card in your deck 9% of the time. And it's an epic. And a lot of no spell decks often are tempo based, or they lean a little bit towards control, like mid-range. Either way, they tend to not need that many epics, just generally. I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence, but whenever I've made no spell decks, they often don't run many epics, because usually the epics in my decks are board clears, since almost every board clear in the game is an epic spell. So yeah, so it's very easy to run just Bookshelf and no other epics in combination with Purple Mascot. The other use is, even though I think that it's better to copy Bookshelf, you could copy Rudolph, and now Rudolph has been buffed. That's a potential angle you could go for. But now there's a third one, Pondman statue. You see, this was a complete accident, but at first I was only looking at Purple Mascot to be like, oh, so I can turn one of these useless Pondman cards into some other epic that's a better card. But I didn't even realize that the only epic in the deck is Pondman statue, which is what gives you Pond Queen. So you could create a Pondman deck that gets up to 4 Pond Queens without even having to use Mr. Society to duplicate anything, just based on the Purple Mascot Pondman statue, while at the same time removing the trash from your hand. So that's just simply good value. That's simply a good idea. I'm not sure what else you could really use it with, because like, if you're running Pondman Span, even though I think that you should, that's like the weakest part of the archetype. If you are going to run Pondman Span, then you have to run Pondman Statue, you kind of do. And if you are running Pondman Statue, if you're forced to run it, then you can't run any other epics with a 100% guarantee that you're going to get them. So that's the only thing, is I'm like, maybe you want an epic better than Pondman Statue, even a deck built around Pondman Statue. And maybe that's not possible because you kind of need to run Pondman Statue for it to make sense. But other than that, I do think that either way, somehow, some way, you're going to see a decent amount of Purple Mascot. I can't spell purple. Purple Mascot in these decks to deal with all these Pondmen clogging your hand and replace them with something better. And just in general, I guess it's a good time to say a PSA. If you couldn't tell, I like this card and I think it's underrated and you guys should use it more. Hey, you budget players, this is a rare card, so it's not that hard to get, and it gives you duplicates of epics. And if you only have one epic, if you don't have many epic cards, that's fine, because you only need one in your deck for it. I'm just saying. There's other changes, though. For example, Sword Emblem. So this card needed a change for goddamn sure. Sword Emblem is now a 7-cost 4/6 with haste, and whenever it takes damage, it has the option to either get a +1 dodge or gain transparency, depending on whether it's played on the left or the right. This is interesting, because honestly, I'm a little scared of this card. It might look underwhelming. It might be like, oh, okay, so like, you know, you get like a 7-cost like bad statted haste, but you can attack it into something, and if it lives, give it dodge so it lives a bit longer. Oh, okay. But transparency is a terrifying mechanic in this game. You should know from Chris. And you should know from from Pickaxe back when it did have transparency. That is a terrifyingly powerful mechanic, and you have to be wary of what is allowed to have transparency. Now, I'm not saying the developers are stupid for giving this transparency. This card in itself is kind of an engine, but not a super powerful one, not one that can get really out of control like Pickaxe, old Pickaxe. So I don't think it's that bad that this can get transparency, but I do think it makes the card strong, because I'm just imagining you will play this, attack it into something, kill it, maybe it gets knocked down to like a 4/3 or 4/2, then you give it transparency, then while it has transparency, your opponent essentially can't kill it unless they get lucky, and then you heal it, and then you attack into something again, and then you have the option to either give it transparency again, or give it to heal it again, or you could... Well, actually, you don't have the option, because it has to be on the left or the right, unless you moved it. I've forgotten if there's a way to move monsters without killing them. Okay, yeah, there's my mistake there. But still, even just for transparency, like I was saying that being able to choose between dodge and transparency would be nice, but honestly, even just spamming this with like, okay, attack in, heal, they can't kill it because it has transparency. Okay, attack in again. Okay, heal. Okay, they can't kill it because it has transparency. You can't play anything that deals less than 6 damage when it's attacked into with Sword Emblem on the board. Because anytime you do, Sword Emblem just attacks in, heals back up, and you can't do anything because it's untargetable. And it can constantly keep itself untargetable as long as you leave it up something to attack. And even if you don't leave anything up for it to attack, well, you can just use self-damage cards. Like, it's not that hard. So, yeah, honestly, this card looks good. Even though it seems expensive for a bad stat line, I think that transparency is scary enough that it's good. And obviously the dodge in itself is also potentially scary, even though it's a bit high-rolling and a bit memey. But honestly, I think the transparency is even better than the dodge. It's close. They're both very powerful mechanics, but I think the transparency is better. Animals. Oh, thank God. Thank God this one got changed. This one was awful before. This used to be, oh my god, I thought it was 7 cost. It used to be an 8 cost. This used to be an 8 cost. Wait. Yeah, 8 cost 5/7. This used to be an 8. Okay, if you don't know the old effect of this card, I don't blame you because not a single person played it. It was an 8 cost 5/7 haste. And you're thinking, okay, so what did it do? It's an 8 cost 5/7 haste. What was its ability? That was it. Okay, I'm lying. It did have some ability, but it wasn't that important. It was an 8 cost 5/7 haste, which I don't remember if it was. I think it was if played on the right, then it would summon a copy of itself with its stats rounded up, and the idea was that then you could attack with 2 things, and because the stats were rounded up and it was a 5/7, it would go up to 2 3/4s. Now don't get me wrong, 2 3/4s is definitely better than 5/7, but do the maths. Is 2 3/4 haste even worth 8 gold? No, it's a 6/8 in total, which an 8/6/8 haste with no other benefits is still bad. Split across 2 bodies, but that's a bad thing here because both of the bodies don't pose a threat. And on top of that, the fact that it's split across 2 bodies means that after attacking into a unit, it's more likely to be dead instantly without being able to live afterwards. So unless you're in a niche situation in which you have 2 targets that you both want to hit, it would almost always be better to keep them in the same body. But then if you keep them in the same body, you get worse stats. Now, I get the fact that you could choose was supposed to make it better, but it didn't really matter when both choices were awful. Like, both of them were so bad. So I'm so glad they changed this card, because it used to be garbage. So now it costs 6, which is much more reasonable, even if they took 1 health off. And now it's a switch card, which either gains haste, which, yes, a 6/5/6 haste still isn't that great, but at least it's an optional thing, and 6/5/6 is definitely better, considering its lower cost, than what it used to be before. Honestly, better than both of the potential options before. It can either gain haste, or give the next 2 monsters in your deck +1/+2. Now, this might still sound like a bad card to you, and I'm not going to say this card's amazing. However, I do think this is a decent card, even though it might look bad to some people. Again, I think 6/5/6 is much better, even though it's still kind of understated. At the same time, it's obviously less understated, but more importantly, I think it matters less when it costs less. The fact that it costs a whole 2 less means that it's more reasonable that it's understated a little bit with the haste as an option. And the second option, I think, is actually huge. Like, I know in total you look at that and it's like, I mean, it's a 6/7/10, which is nice, but it's a 6/7/10 over an extremely long period of time before it gives you its full value, which probably makes it bad. And, like, you know, I would agree, but the thing is that I think that being able to give stats to any target you want, any monster you want, is just generally a really powerful effect. I mean, I could see this going into the Sanddog duplication deck. I could see this going into just about any deck that runs the Vessel and wants to copy something big and just keep recurring it, honestly. And it's just very easy to slot in. I think that's the thing, like, one of the main problems with those decks, even though they're generally quite powerful, if they have a drawback, then usually one of their main drawbacks is, well, it's awkward to try and make this work, because usually to make the whole synergy pop off in the first place, you need to play a lot of expensive high synergy cards. So having a card that helps one of these Vessel buff decks that is low synergy, can work without any other cards in the deck, you just literally, all you need to do is play it on have the right side of the board available to play it on. And all you have to do is hit it on the card you want. And even if you don't hit it on the card you want, it's not a dead card, it's just slightly below average. And it has the option to be used for haste, keeping you alive, and it's not that expensive. It just seems very convenient, even if its potential isn't as high as some other cards. I think it's going to be a great filler card for decks that just generally want to use the vessel on a big target. And again, I think those decks are absolutely, like, valid. I mean, again, Sanddog is stupid powerful, but there's obviously other examples. There was the meme Buttercup Creek deck I had in the past, even though I don't think that's possible anymore. But and if Newbert was still around, Newbert, I'm struggling to think of an example we can do now besides Sanddogs. There will be examples, I just can't think of them. I guess technically Muffet, even though Muffet you don't typically tend to buff because she's already got good stats, but you can buff her, and those buffs will carry over, and it will be good value. Anyway, Mold Mega. Wow, they remembered molds exist. I sure didn't. Mold Mega used to be, I think it had the same stats, did it? Yeah, it still had the same stats. And it used to be that it would burn, I think it was like 10 molds or something in your dust pile, not 4. And it would summon a mold small in every single free space on your board. So as long as you played it on an empty board, it would be a big 9/6/9 that would fill your board with 3/2s. So yeah, it's a similar thing still. It's still built around this whole idea of having molds in your dust pile and then turning them into this big finisher card for mold synergy. Only now it's a smaller reward, but for a more easy to meet condition that triggers twice, once when it's played and once when it dies. The condition is now 4 molds instead of like 10 or 11 or whatever, however many it was before. And the reward, instead of a full board of 3 twos, is a single mold big that triggers its magic, which is to catch a mold small inside of it. Not one on the board, it just creates one that's inside of it and release it when it dies. So basically, to simplify this is a 9/6/9 taunt that summons a 4/3 that summons a 3/2 when it dies. And when it dies, it summons another 4/3 that summons a 3/2 when it dies. So, in its totality, this isn't that different from the original version of the card, because in total, you're getting technically quote-unquote more stats, in fact, because you get 2 4/3s and 2 3/2s in total rather than 3 3/2s at best all on the board at once. But it can be seen as less powerful instantaneously, just because obviously you only get it one at a time now rather than all at once, which could matter against a Kempo deck that might want to kill faster. But overall, I do like this change. I think it makes it so that Mold Mega isn't so difficult to play. I did actually use Mold Mega briefly ages ago, and I found that it was certainly playable, but it felt like it was weirdly difficult to play for such a straightforward deck where you just slam stats on the board, and that's mostly all you're doing. It felt like I was supposed to be, like, to make it work, I'd need more high synergy cards to make it consistent. But then, it's not really a high synergy deck. It's not made to be a high synergy deck, Mold Smalls. It's just, you drop down stats, and those stats get more stats because you're running stat cards that have stats, and it's like, okay. So I like this change overall. I still think it's a little bit weird that Mold Mega even exists, but Mold Smalls does need a top end. I don't know. I feel like I'd be in favor of reducing its cost and slightly reducing its upside. But I don't mind it so much as it is now. I mean, at least it costs less than 10. If it cost 11 or more, I'd be... oof. Even if they made the stats bigger to compensate, I wouldn't be happy about that. Anyway, Spaghetti. Confused about this change, to be honest. Wait, am I wrong? Spaghetti. Wait. Is this... Wait. So it says here Spaghetti. That is the right thing. Cost has gone from 4 to 8. It still says 4. Attack has gone... So apparently this is the old version, but they say the new one that's here. I don't know what's going on here. I'll read what the new one says anyway, and you can tell me in the comments if this is like a mistake. So the new version is apparently an 8 cost 3/7, and the effect update says shock. Heal HP to you equal to the spell's cost and lose this shock. It's the same ability. What is going on? There's no other cards here. Spaghetti. Well, this I wasn't anticipating. I don't know what's going on there. So for one, that effect update seems to be the exact same effect, word for word, as it says on the old version of the card. So that's not an effect update. Just a minute. Heal. I'm just going to double check that it wasn't another card that had been reworked and they accidentally put in Spaghetti as the name because it's the same ability as Spaghetti has. But no, they clearly just haven't put the changes through. Either that or the crafting is bugged. Let me just refresh. Spaghetti. Yeah, it's I don't know. So yes, this card, you play a spell that costs 2 or more once with it on the board and it heals you equal to the cost of the spell, and then it loses that ability. 4 cost 4/5 is what it used to be, and they apparently want to make it an 8 cost 3/7. I am so confused. Like, is this whole thing a typo? Because I would just think, oh, maybe the servers are bugged or whatever. But like, even when I first saw this change, I'm like, isn't that awful? I've never seen a single person play Spaghetti even once. And even though I've meant to try and sneak it into a deck, I've not even used Spaghetti once. The only place in which I would think Spaghetti would be useful would be if you were playing a Determination deck and you wanted to combo Spaghetti with Hypergonic, even though that kills the Spaghetti, which sucks because it has good stats for cost. But maybe if you really cared about that 11 HP heal, you would play it like that. That feels like the only place in which Spaghetti is useful. So why would they make it cost double and make its stats, well, about the same? They're not really worse like that. It's about the same as it. Why would they double the cost of it? It's already a card I never see anyone use that I don't even think is that good. I don't know what's going on here. I'm not going to lie. I give up. I do not know what is going on there. Birdly Plush has tragically lost his nipples because... okay, the joke I'm making is that I don't remember if I ever made this in a video or if this is just saying I was joking in the Discord server about, so let me clarify. Thingy, you know how like Birdly was flattered by how the plush version himself actually had nipples. I was joking before that the fact that Birdly plush still has 6 health while Birdly has 5 is because of the nipples. He must have lost them. These must be fake. Nah, anyway, this is wait, this hasn't gone through either. What is going on here? Right, well, I was going to say, this is a tragic change, but it's expected. Token cards have been getting easier and easier to get. They're still not pips, but they're pretty easy to get. And any deck that can get a token card that costs 3 or more in their hand relatively consistently instantly wants to run Birdly Plush. Great stats for cost, amazing discounts. Super busted with Spider Donuts or Spider Croissants using Muffet. Just quite simply, broken card, probably still good, even with the nerf. I'm just a little bit sad because I've been meaning to get round to playing more decks that run Birdly Plush, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. And I was literally just starting to make some decks with Birdly Plush in it, and now they nerfed him. I should have been a bit quicker to it. So yeah, that's it for the balance changes to the monsters. These grey ones, I was a bit like, whoa, what's going on here when I saw the grey colour. The reason why they're grey is because they're actually not any different. They've just reworded them. Since the switch keyword now exists, these were cards that already depended on whether you played them on the left side or the right side. Like, that changed what their effect was. And now they have the same effect, only they've written it with the new switch keyword instead of it just being like, oh, we don't know, it just does it on the left, let me re-explain. So yeah, besides that, not much to say. Only 2 other changes. Contamination went from an 8 cost to a 7 cost. That surprises me, because 8 cost Contamination with rework Contamination still seemed good. But in fairness, I never played it. So, I don't know, maybe it was bad. That still surprises me. I'm not complaining, I guess. I'd like to see it become better. If it means that, again, if they are going to push Perseverance back into a darker type that's better against damaged monsters, then I'm fine with them pushing this brand new Contamination rework. I just hope they get more damaged monster synergy in future, because it feels really weird having Contamination be the only one right now after they removed basically... In fact, why am I saying basically? After they removed literally every single aspect of Perseverance's identity that made them stronger against damaged monsters. Like, that felt really weird. Anyway, and finally the artifacts. Small balance change to Science. It was getting a little bit too good, and they made a small change that made it so that the 4 Gaster Blasters it gives you in your deck and the 1 it gives you in your hand guaranteed only appear at the start, or rather the end of your 3rd turn, as in you can't play them until turn 4. If you're wondering what's up with that, that sounds weirdly specific. I don't think this will change much, to be honest, but just in general, it was really fucking annoying when you were playing against a Science deck and you were a tempo-focused deck, and you realise, well, oh god, they've got lots of Gaster Blasters, they're going to kill all my big units that I'm going to use to try and kill them. I need to get on the board fast. But if you played a card straight away, no matter what you played, they could instantly kill it with a Gaster Blaster, guaranteed, and there was no chance you ever had of them living. At least now, if you play something before turn 3, you get the chance to get a shot in before the Gaster Blaster goes off. I like that change for that reason. I think that's fully justified. I think that Science is not... Like, the way that you use Science isn't going to be affected too much by this. I think Science is going to be just about as viable as before. It's just not going to hard counter tempo decks quite as hard. And they already hard counter them pretty hard, so I don't think that's going to make them cry. Like, if you're a science deck and you're into a deck that really cares about having big units, you already are just, like, you've already got a massive, like, benefit there. You've already got a good chance at winning the game. I don't think the slight advantage of your opponent being able to play a unit and be pretty sure that for the first 3 turns it will get to a live, I don't think that's going to knock it out of usability. So, yeah, not much is looking like it's going to change there. Oh, yeah, one last thing as well. I thought there was something I forgot to mention about this deck when I quickly glanced over it. I had a realization, though, with this deck. If you are going to run the full-on, all-in Pond Man strategy with Dark Pond Man generation and chessboards and all that, try running Hourglass. I was looking at the artifacts and I didn't know what to run, and I was thinking I want to run tempo-based artifacts, but like I don't know what. And then I saw this, and I was like, "Oh, you know what? That actually works. You can get free Pond Men this way, and you can also discount your shuffled copies with all your copies with Mr. Society, shuffled or copied in hand, and you can also discount." The Pond Man you get from Pond Man statue, but not Pond Man statue, Dark Pond Man. But most importantly, you can also discount the Pond Man Queen. Sorry, the Pond Queen. Is there any other thing you can discount? I think it's just those, but still, those are some big ones. Yeah. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're enjoying the new patch as well. And I'll see you next month, whenever the next patch is. Or maybe it'll even be another mid-season. Who knows? To be fair, this wasn't a particularly big patch. It was about average in size, so who knows? We might see another mid-season patch. I'm honestly kind of surprised this happened. In fact, I'm surprised I didn't mention this earlier in the video, just before I end. It's weird coincidence because literally just before this update, I was realizing, like, I literally forgot chess pieces existed, and I just randomly came across chessboard in my collection, like, and I was like, oh damn, you know, I never even played a chess like piece deck, synergy deck. Maybe I should try and make one, even if I don't think they're going to be good, because I didn't think it was good just looking at it. Like, maybe I should give it a shot and just see how good it is, and I can take out all the things I think are bad, and maybe I'll be able to make an optimized version of it that's decent. Especially because old chessboard used to be able to copy candy, and even though I wasn't sure of how I could give them candy, I then realized that now with new self-reflection, I could potentially give a chess piece candy, and then keep copying that with chessboards, and maybe get some really powerful effect off of that. Can't do that anymore now. So, kind of inconvenient timing, but it's weird that just when I was having the idea to try out chess pieces, they get reworked. But I'm kind of surprised that was what this update was. Not that I didn't think that chess pieces deserved a rework, they kind of did. But I'm surprised that they're focusing on that right now, considering I get the impression they haven't really finished adding Chapter 2 cards, because, I don't know, it feels like, maybe I'm just wrong because I can't think of that much off the top of my head, but it feels like there's a lot of stuff in Chapter 2 they still don't have in the game. But the only thing that's coming to mind instantly, though, to be fair, is pop-ups. I know they don't have pop-ups as cards in the game yet. Yeah, to be fair, I'm struggling to think of things off the top of my head. Maybe they have gotten most of the Chapter 2 cards in. Well, either way, thank you for watching. Oh, I'll quickly check what the season start quests are. I may as well show you those. Trigger 50 switch effects. The last one's going to be easy, especially with Pond Men. Cast 40 spells of other souls. I like that. Catch 30 monsters. Ah, so they are pushing this catch thing. You see, I was a little bit like, am I just, like, is this just in my head? To be fair, it is only 3 cards. It's only Shorm, Dimensional Box, and, like, Queen. So I was thinking maybe this is just in my head. Maybe I'm exaggerating it. But it does seem like they are pushing this catch archetype. So yeah, no early season quests out yet, of course. See you in the next one. Bye.